think one of the most important of those, well, there's a number of them that are very important, but one of the most important has to do with rights to a territory that includes resources that they need to reproduce themselves as a society, and the peace and quiet and tranquility to develop according to their own rhythm, their own model of development. And one of the big issues, as you point out, especially with the current government here in Peru, the Garcia government, has been the push to explore and extract hydrocarbons in the entire Amazon area. There has been at least a threefold increase in exploration licenses given out, and lots now cover about 75–80% of the Amazon.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because just looking at a couple of figures, at the end of 2008, there were 19 lots in production in the Amazon, 61 in exploration, and there's currently a new round of bidding going on that will bring the total number of lots in the country up to about 100. In just the Amazon in 2004, oil or hydrocarbon lots, oil and gas lots, covered about 15% of the area of the Peruvian Amazon. 2 years later, in 2006, that figure was up to about 65%, and now, as you say, it's 75–80%. And indeed, there's almost no part of the Amazon that is not covered, except for national parks and areas that cannot be covered.
And I think the issue isn't, no, we don't want oil production in Peru. Everyone uses oil. Everyone uses gasoline. Indigenous peoples use kerosene and gasoline. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is where do you do it, and how do you deal with the impacts from that? And I think for Indigenous peoples, a third very important issue is the issue of consultation. If you put an oil exploration concession on top of communities, do the local Indigenous peoples have the right to be consulted? Well, international law says yes, they do. Peruvian law, now with one of these decrees of 1064, says no, they don't. That all mining and petroleum exploration and exploitation has certain right-of-ways which are guaranteed. And so the whole issue of consultation has been buried, and that's one of the issues that they're protesting against.
What exactly does consultation mean? It seems to mean different things to different people, because government officials will say, we do consult, we have these workshops where the oil company goes in, or the mining company goes in and explains to people what it is they're going to be doing and answers questions. People in these communities, however, seem to feel that that's not sufficient. They feel that they're being informed. Sometimes they're being informed after the concession has already been granted, and consultation for them means something else. It means we have a right to have a say in what happens and how it happens. What does Convention 169 say about consultation? It seems to have some sort of ambiguous language in it.
It's perhaps a bit ambiguous. It says consult the peoples concerned through appropriate procedures, and in particular through their representative institutions, whenever consideration is being given to legislative or administrative measures that may affect them directly. The consultations carried out in application of this convention shall be undertaken in good faith and in a form appropriate to the circumstances, with the objective of achieving agreement or consent to the proposed measures. Now, it doesn't say that there has to be consent in order for measures to go forward. But it does say the objective of achieving agreement or consent. So there is some ambiguity in that, yes. But I think, of course, both sides of this, the government side tends to interpret that on less consent and less of an agreement, and the Indigenous peoples tend to interpret that as there needs to be an agreement, there needs to be consent. So those are really the two positions that are that are confronting each other here.
Environment Minister Antonio Brack the other day said that as long as international norms are followed, as long as Peruvian legislation is followed now, the impact from these large operations really is not great enough to merit the concern that's been expressed in these recent days.
Excuse me, that's a big if. If international standards were followed, probably there would be a lot less impact. That's the big problem. You know? And in our particular case, our problem isn't so much with the petroleum companies themselves, it's with the Peruvian state that is not enforcing its own legislation, not enforcing its own standards in terms of environmental impact studies, in terms of cleaning up the mess, or assuring that no mess is made in the first place. So, sure, you can't disagree with that. If the standards are met, then there probably would be less impact, absolutely. The problem is the standards are not being met. And I think that issue is an economic issue. You know, it's a question of is the company going to invest or not invest what it needs to invest to prevent these impacts. The issue with the pipeline that you mentioned probably is not, there's probably some issue with erosion because it's going through very rugged countryside with heavy rains, heavy rainfall. But the issue is so far has been leakage. How many leaks so far from that pipe, which is 3 years old? So clearly the issue was the initial investment in quality pipes, in quality work to assure, well, was the government there to check out the quality of the pipes, the quality of the work? I don't think it was. The government has to pay attention to this issue. I was told by a source very close to the Council of Ministers that a decision was made in the Council of Ministers to ignore this strike.